Last week, it was Alberta. This week, the conversation widens from Saskatchewan to Quebec. Questions about Canada's future are bubbling up again. Tonight, we'll break down where the pressure points really are.
Prime Minister Carney has a mic drop moment in Davos, and then we're going to take a breath and remind ourselves why Canadians can argue fiercely and still manage to stay together. Well, before we get started tonight, Eddie, I just wanted to take a moment. Our segment last week on Alberta and the sovereignty movement out there really touched a nerve, especially with a lot of Albertans. And I have to say, like with the comments that we received, very, very passionate overall. They really are feeling this. And I was quite impressed with the quality of the comments that we did receive. And we've picked up some new subscribers, and we welcome the new subscribers as well as our regular subscribers. And so, I tried to answer as many comments as I could. I may have missed some, especially in the last day or two, because I've been tied up doing other things. And if I did, I apologize. But, had a couple of conversations going back and forth with some of the comments as well. And I know you've had a chance to have a look as well. And your thoughts, Eddie?
Yeah, I was really touched by the outpouring of some real solid comments on our segments and our show last week as it related to both Alberta and the frustrations with our fellow Canadians in Alberta in terms of what all of this means to them in terms of not being heard by the rest of Canada. And I think both you and I can very handily say that it was a little, I'm not going to say an outright education for us, but it was really important for us to really, really get a handle of how Canadians are thinking from coast to coast. And I'm really happy that our viewers in Alberta voiced their opinions. Some of them voiced their objections quite loudly to us. And that's what our show is all about. We want to be able to hear from Canadians coast to coast in terms of what bothers them, what do they like, and you know what? Any comments that you and I make that they don't agree with, and in many cases do agree with us. So I was really, really profoundly touched by the response we had from our viewers out west.
And we thank you for that, and we hope that you stay with us. And tonight we're going to pick up on the conversation as a result of the outpouring that we received last week. I think before we really get into this segment, Eddie, I have to just single out my favorite comment that really made me chuckle. Okay. At the very end of a rather detailed comment, it was, "You two are useless liberals."
I didn't see that one.
It was my favorite. The way it was put in and delivered, full marks to that individual, because I still laugh when I think of it. So I've been called a lot of things, and useless liberal, that's a new one. But there you have it. And that's all part and parcel of the game. So, all right, without any further ado, let's get into this and see if we can get things rolling. Alberta isn't the only province where frustration with Confederation is growing.
And Saskatchewan is seeking renewed rhetoric all around autonomy, while Quebec's sovereignty movement is never far from the surface.
The motivations differ, but the frustration rhymes. And one province that I thought I'd heard some things about this in the past, about Saskatchewan and some rumblings out there. And as I did some searching around over the weekend, I did discover that there is, in fact, a group that is pushing for a referendum on sovereignty. And we are lucky enough to be joined by a member of the group, Clark Brotzell. Now, Clark's internet connection is by satellite, and right now, at least anyway, the video portion of his feed is not there, but we do have the audio portion, and we felt that it was important enough to hear about his group and what they're doing and what they're hoping to accomplish, so that we're going to go with the audio portion of it. And you will notice a delay, and that is a bit of the satellite technology that is involved as well. So, Clark, first of all, tell us the name of your group and how and why you got started. And I think his connection just dropped out again. We're going to go to the homepage. This is the homepage of Clark's group, and we'll just wait for a minute to see if he can come back in. They're pushing for a sovereign Saskatchewan, and it's the United Grassroots is the name of their group, and so they're pushing for a referendum, and what it boils down to is the fact that the purpose of the referendum is to empower the provincial government to negotiate new terms for Saskatchewan's relationship, whether as part of Canada or as an independent nation. And Clark, you're back with us now, and we just started to talk a bit about what your group is about. How did your group get started, and how serious are people about this in Saskatchewan?
Good evening, fellas. Yeah, Unified Grassroots started up in summer of 2021. And it was in response to a lot of COVID measures that had come down in relation to public schools. I wasn't involved with the organization then. I've only been involved for just over a year. But that was the what got everybody going. And it morphed from a concerned parents group into an organization that we have now called United Grassroots. So we have about 9,000 members, and we started a petition, as you can see there, that you brought up off our website after the last federal election. We were very disappointed in the results, and so we started a petition. In Saskatchewan, we're not as fortunate as Alberta. We don't have a public referendum legislation in Saskatchewan. So all we can do is garner enough signatures to take to the provincial government to indicate the support for an initiative such as a sovereignty referendum. But in Saskatchewan, only the Lieutenant General or a member sitting in the legislature can initiate a referendum question. So we're not as fortunate as Alberta, but nonetheless, last summer we had a lot of meetings, a lot of town halls, and right now we have about 5,500 signatures on our plebiscite petition. And it's Alberta's been very serious about this for much longer than Saskatchewan has.
Clark, what really sparked the discontent with the deal that you have in Confederation at the moment? What is really driving it as far as people are concerned?
Sorry, back again.
Okay. I don't know if you heard that last question, but what I'm asking is, what is really driving it? What are people concerned about as far as the Saskatchewan's position in Confederation at the moment?
Well, there's two things. There's the economic side. Saskatchewan, we have a grievance, I believe, with the balance of payments and the way the federal money flows back and forth in Canada and Saskatchewan. the last number of years has been a net contributor. But there's also a bigger question, I think, in terms of I don't know if you want to say it's a cultural difference. There's so many different issues that the federal Liberal government, so much of their legislation is just contrary to what we want.
This really drives home how important it is for the governments to really work with the telecoms to get internet service to
Absolutely.
more sparsely populated areas of the country, for sure. And I'm sure he'll be back in a moment. In the meantime, Eddie, we do have here he comes. Okay, Clark, we have you back, and do you want to just pick up where you left off as far as you were talking about the cultural difference?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard me. I went from the federal gun buyback legislation to Bill C9, which would potentially put religious freedom in terms. You could be criminalized for speaking about the Bible. There's just so many things that way. When I say cultural, I'm not sure how else to expand on that. But we really just feel that the Liberal government keeps getting reelected by Eastern Canada, and I think it's people in Saskatchewan, myself certainly. We just feel we've been trying to work this system for 40 years. You look back, there was a Reform Party, the West Wants In. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been trying to, we wanted a reformed Senate. We didn't get that. And we're just on the hamster wheel here. We just keep going round and round and round and round. And people in Saskatchewan, a lot of people are just fed up and saying, there's no animosity with the East. I think it's just become very clear that the Eastern Canada has a certain view of life and Western Canada has a certain view of life, and it's not compatible. And I think the economics are the hard side of it, where we just think that
It's interesting what he is saying.
Yeah.
First of all, very similar to Alberta, the division of the money, the resources, as far as the money is concerned, and how that's used by the federal government. And very similar to, and that's what Alberta is saying too, the equalization payments are out of whack. And it seems like,
over
it seems like
40 years not being heard. That's
exactly
because that spans quite a few governments, both blue and red, over the last 40 years. So it's not just specific to what party's in charge now or the debacle over the last 10 years, for example.
Right.
This is widespread over 40 years. So, and then it's interesting too, though. You look at what Quebecers and the East Coast are saying. It's exactly what Clark was saying. Well, the rest of Canada is not hearing us. So I think there's a lot of opportunity of better dialogue and better communication. But then by the same token, if you listen to what Clark is saying in terms of the view of the people of Saskatchewan, well, it's been 40 years. How much longer do you want us to wait? I guess is one question as well, right? That begs to be asked.
Yeah. Clark is back. Clark, your approach to it, your group's approach to it, seems to be at least a little more open or softer, if you will, because you're looking to either negotiate a new deal within Confederation or outside of Confederation, whereas the Alberta movement that is gathering momentum is a movement that they want out, period. There's no discussion about a better deal. They just want out. Why is it Saskatchewan, or at least your group and the people that you're coming in contact with, why are you what do you think the difference is between Alberta and Saskatchewan as far as that is concerned, that you're open to trying to negotiate a new deal in Confederation, whereas Alberta is not?
Well, that's a good question. I think part of that could perhaps be the increased financial burden that Alberta feels they bear for Canada, and perhaps that's part of what they're a little more eager to depart. It's so tricky to say how you get a better deal in Canada. If you look at how to change the Constitution, you need, I think, 7 provinces and 65% of the population to agree to any kind of change. I don't think there's much probability that that's going to happen. When you look at the seat disbursement in the Senate, if you look at the seat disbursement in Parliament, like, how do we get a better deal? The Liberal government doesn't really cater to Saskatchewan voters because they know that we don't have any influence in the outcome of a federal election. So it's not that we can vote less for the Liberals than we do now, So I think people would like to stay in, but they need to see something from, I wouldn't say the rest of Canada, because it's really a political issue. They need to see something from the governing federal government, the Liberal government, in terms of how they're going to change their approach. I don't know if you guys remember back in, this goes back a number of years, but with the alienation of the West, the Liberal government put in some shadow cabinet members, non-elected folks from the Liberal Party that would, so to say, speak for Saskatchewan or speak for Alberta, or try to come out here and measure the level of our discontent and what would make us happy. And, that's a little bit disingenuous when you do that, because it's really like you're patting us on the head and saying, well, we're going to try to do something to make you feel better, but we're not really going to do anything of any substance. So, everything that's been tried has not really resulted in any substantive change. And I'm not sure, like, even the level of discontent that's now reaching the general public in terms of some of the legacy media outlets are finally speaking about it. It's not like the federal government has thrown their hands up in the air and said, oh, we didn't know you guys weren't happy. What can we do to make, what can we do to change things? It's business as usual. So, what do you guys think? What could you do? What could happen to make Saskatchewan get a better deal? How does that work?
That's the $64 question, if you will, Clark. I don't know. Here we are in Quebec, and already we could find ourselves in a very similar situation after early October. I think it's October 5th is the provincial election. It's early October, right. Anyway. But the Parti Québécois is leading in the polls substantially, and it looks like, unless there's a major turnaround somewhere, some kind of a blessing, they're going to win. And they are committed to holding another referendum within their first term. And some people are saying maybe within the first year of their first term of government. And they're strictly, there's no in between. Like Alberta, it's strictly, they want out. They want Quebec out. And the leaders laying out plans now as to how that would come about. One of the last ones that was released was they've decided to go with their own currency. So I don't know. Here in Montreal, life seems to be okay. Like it's great. It's a great city, and I don't get. I totally don't get where the Parti Québécois is coming from, because look at the transfer payments. Quebec gets the lion's share of the equalization payments. The lion's share of the equalization payments. That just boggles my mind. And pretty much anything that Quebec wants, it gets from the federal government. So I don't know. It's a cultural thing, yes, but anyway. That's a whole issue for another show, and I'm still trying to digest it. Eddie, I mean, you're a born Montrealer, and you've been through all of the referendums from this perspective, whereas I was on the outside looking in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about Montreal. I think the greatest push for this entire I'm not even going to call it sovereignty, just clear separation from Canada. Most of that push comes outside of Montreal and outside of Quebec City, the capital of Quebec, if you can imagine. It's pretty much all in the rural regions and the outskirts of those two the largest cities here in Quebec. Montreal, bilingualism is at about 83%. I speak French, I speak English, and a third language, and about 60% of the population speaks both that and another language. So, generally speaking, in Montreal, I'm not sure that the necessary votes may be there for a yes, an answer to a yes question here. But times are changing. We've got the younger generation that's picking up on all the social media posts that the governments are pushing through in terms of getting the momentum going for a referendum and the separation question. But predominantly speaking, this is coming outside the greater metropolitan area. So do they have just cause for that? Well, you know what? The reasoning here in Quebec compared to perhaps what Clark is describing in Saskatchewan, and we talked about in Alberta last week, is substantially different. Here in Quebec, it's all about the French culture, protection of the French culture, protection of the French language, and everything that goes along with that since British occupation hundreds of years ago. So there's a lot of history here in terms of why the people of Quebec want a separate country. But you know what? In Alberta, whether it's Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Quebec, the populations have just cause for asking what they're asking of in terms of the separation movement or further negotiations with Canada in terms of the Constitution. But equally, I think what Clark is saying, I really hear what he's saying, and then I hear what Albertans have been telling us from the comments we received in our show last week, that they have valid reasons for their push right now. And I think a lot of it has to do with just absolute poor communication or just being completely ignored. As Clark has said, the people of Saskatchewan have pretty much not been heard for the last 40 years across multiple political divides, whether conservative, liberal, over the last 40 years. So what gives? How does this present government, for example, it happens to be liberal, how do they do to put nose to the grindstone and basically say, you know what do we need to do now? Yeah, there have been screw ups over the last 40 years. This is what we're going to do to make a serious push to keep you guys within Confederation. And you know what? I think that's going to be a pretty tall hill to climb, but not impossible anyway.
Yeah. Clark, just before we let you go, how long are you going to be collecting signatures, and what happens? What sort of time frame do you have for presenting those signatures to the legislature?
Well, as I mentioned previously, there's so the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project has come into being, and they're really pushing hard on the sovereignty issue. We have a lot of members that are not so hard on sovereignty, but are very hard on keeping government accountable in many ways. And we're kind of going to look at the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project to lead the charge on sovereignty. And there's another organization called Prairie Rising, which is trying to talk to the provincial government about sovereignty and how it could come about. So we'll continue to collect signatures. We don't have a timeline. Obviously, you know, with 5,400 people in a province of 1.2 million, there's obviously a long ways to go. But there's been a real groundswell since the Saskatchewan Prosperity Project got underway. And like, I'm a firm believer in sovereignty. Again, you know, I don't have any animosity to my brothers in the East. It's just, you know, the time has come for something different. And I'd like to say, you know, that with Prime Minister Carney's speech in Davos there about a new world order and, you know, a fractured world system and all that good stuff, well, maybe he could apply some of that to Canada. And, you know, maybe we need a new national order. And maybe he should address the fracture in his own country before he's trying to address.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love what you just said.
A legitimate point for sure. I'm not sure if he's going to make it back. Let's just give him a second. While we're waiting to see if he makes it back, let's catch up on a few comments here. Okay, first one that came in from Maxstar 144, and he or she says Saskatchewan Prosperity Project. Oh yeah, right. Just when we started the broadcast, that came up, and Clark just mentioned it. And that group is having meetings across the province. Then we have the Rocket Shop. So many things need to be changed. Senate reform, better representation in Ottawa, less federal overreach into provincial jurisdiction. And Maxstar 144 comes back with, there is no way to get the East to give up the power it has. Bills C2, C8, C9, the blatant corruption is very much the very last straws for Alberta. We are done. You can enjoy China. And then Deborah comes in with, I understand completely why Western provinces want out. The flow of money is lopsided. I agree that Eastern Canada votes Liberal, but I think if we had a better candidate, there could be a chance. When she says a better candidate, I presume on the Conservative side, the opposition side, to cast votes. Yeah. Clark, I see you're back, and I just wanted to, your very last couple of sentences in that last response were cut off when you dropped out. Do you want to just make a brief summary?
Yes, that'd be good. Yeah, as I said, you know, Prime Minister Carney and his comments in Davos, he could apply that to Canada. If he wants to make new deals around the world, he can make new deals at home, and maybe he can do something. Maybe there's a chance if he wants to, you know, enter into a brave new world, drag the rest of us along with him, and get a new deal for Canada. That'd be great.
All right. Clark, I want to thank you for taking the time out to speak with us this evening. And, you know, it's certainly something we're going to be following a lot more closely as we go forward, because, as I said earlier, we are looking at the very distinct possibility of another referendum here in Quebec as well. So I think really what we're beginning to see, and hopefully it really does push Ottawa to finally sit up and start taking notice that people are not happy with the old way of doing things. It just isn't working. And especially, you mentioned about younger people. Here in Quebec, it's the same way. It's the younger people in particular who are really quite open to cutting the ties and going out on our own kind of thing. So it's going to be an interesting spring and summer, I would think, right across the country. So thank you so much for taking the time out with us tonight. Thank you. Thanks for having me. All right. Okay, and we have one more comment to put up here too. And let's see. Deborah says, to the point of Carney fixing the fracture in Canada, it's really hard to fix the sofa when the wolf is at the door. I agree with him, but we are in dangerous times. That we are. And I'm sure the wolf licks its lips every so often when it sees discussions like we were having this evening and like we had last week and the comments following last week's program. So there's no doubt, Eddie, that this is an issue that's not going to go away. And we talked about Carney and leadership at home.
Yeah.
And this is now becoming more and more an issue where he needs to spend some time and deal with it. And I think the whole idea of taking what he pitched to the elite in Switzerland this week is really does and should apply here at home.
Yeah. Well, think about it, Gary. 3 out of the 10 provinces and 3 territories are looking at leaving the Canadian Confederation. You know what? Deborah's absolutely right. It's hard to fix a sofa while the insane wolf is banging on the door. Makes life very, very difficult and challenging. But you know what? 3 out of 10 provinces, there's got to be some real high-level focused attention to address this, Gary, because you know what? That's a hell of a lot of population that has contributed to this great country of ours for a long time that just essentially might disappear over the last 5 years. I don't know. The Confederation of Canada, it doesn't look too stable with all that gone. Alberta, Quebec, potentially Saskatchewan, and who knows how many other movements there are right now in other provinces that are kind of looking at themselves and saying, you know what, we haven't had a fair shake over the last 40 years either. And who can blame them, Gary? I think you and I would be hard pressed to say that, since the late 60s, early 70s, that any government in Ottawa paid the necessary attention to Western Canada to the level that would have prevented what we're facing right now in terms of Alberta separating, and now we have the cage being rattled to a significant degree. I'm speculating here based on what Clark said, and then of course you have the regular language issue and debates here in Quebec that push for separation. I agree with Clark. That last statement that he made, you know what? That's very, very profound to me personally as a Canadian and wanting to see everybody stay in Canada. Very, very profound statement in terms of the display of global leadership that happened in Davos as presented by Prime Minister Carney. You know what? We need somebody in this country to step up to the podium just like that, as passionate as that, speaking to Canadians right across the board. And you know what? I'm sure Clark and Albertans are going to say, you know what? Talk is cheap right now. Show me the goods. So Prime Minister Carney has got his hands full. He's got the insane wolf down south. And on top of that, his family here in Canada, his provinces, his constituents are not happy with the way certain areas of this country are being treated or have been treated, and they're fed up. He's got his hands full. So on top of the talk in front of the podium in Canada, he's got to have a drastic action plan that'll appease Canadians to vote and stay within the confederation of this wonderful country of ours. His statements were very profound. Clark's were. And you know what, Gary? It'd be great to get him back on the show in 2-3 months down the line after seeing what happens to the global economy, see what happens as a result of Carney's speech in Europe, and what he's going to do over the next 3 or 4 months. I'd love to get Clark back on the show.
Okay, we have some more comments here. Monel says, agree with Deborah. As much as we need to fix Canada, yes, right now, he needs to fix the economy for all of Canada and keep that wolf away before we can start dealing with internal items. And she also added, he has a cabinet who should also be doing the internal stuff. Well, and a minister in charge of the internal stuff as well. Okay, so Maxstar 144, Alberta does 88% of its trade with the U.S., and Carney just pissed off our number one customer. He just did the independence movement another favor. He is our best promoter. Now, there is a new take on Carney's speech.
True.
Real new take on Carney's speech. Interesting.
I can relate to that.
Pardon?
I can relate to that statement.
Well,
there's a pro and con to every position, and here happens to be a very important con for a major contributor to Canada, being Alberta. So yeah, there's always a trade-off somewhere, unfortunately.
Maxstar corrected me. Maxstar is a man. I wasn't sure at the time, so thank you for that. I apologize if I offended you. Prairie Cossack says, even if we had 5 pipelines, all 4 directions and up, the Confederation is unreformable and flawed by design. Constitution is impossible to reopen, as proponents of status quo will oppose it. Unreformable. Okay.
Yeah.
And also it's not about industries or equalization. It's about taxation without representation and preserving what's left of Canada we were proud of. And again, I get where they're coming from, Eddie. As we were sitting here and talking to Clark, it was running through my mind, how do we do this? Like, how do we get better representation for provinces that do not have the population density that Ontario does and Quebec? There has to be some kind of formula that can be derived to get more voices in Ottawa for the provinces, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador. They all have very small representations at the table, in Parliament in general. And I totally agree with, we do one of 2 things with the Senate. We either abolish it or we make it electable.
Yeah.
The whole thing that they did, where you apply for a Senate position and you go through a process. The appointments that are going in still have extremely strong political connections with the party in power, for the most part. There's the odd non-liberal thrown into the Senate, or put in the Senate, I should say, just to kind of try and keep the wolves at bay as far as those kinds of complaints. But for the most part, you go through the process and you still look around and longtime party supporters and workers, and it needs to be either elected or it needs to go. And maybe we're at a point.
Reform, right?
Yeah, or maybe we're at a point, Eddie, that as a country we need to grow up and break away from the parliamentary type of a system, and it just, you have no idea. I am no monarchist by any stretch of the imagination at all. You have no idea how it just makes the hair stand up on my back when I hear reference to the king now and all of the royal family and how people will go, all gaga over them. Like, I really don't care. Like, just stop throwing them in my face. I don't care. We need to grow up, become big boys and girls in this country. That's a whole other episode.
Well, I guess the question comes just in my summary is, yes, this speaks to electoral reform. I can't tell you how many prime ministers ago, over the last few decades, had said, yes, electoral reform. And pardon the language, no one's had the balls to push that through. And what does that essentially mean? Equal representation. And you asked, what kind of a formula is there? How can we come up with a formula? You know what, Gary? I really think we can come up with a formula. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, okay? And I think Clark at some point mentioned while he was with us, it's representation. It's all political. What leader of what political party is going to push the criteria of electoral reform when the ruling party may in fact lose some of those electorates? That's a big, big ask. And you know what, Gary? It's doable if it's not a politicized item. If the leader of Canada, I'm not going to say it's Carney, or I hope it's going to be Carney, whoever it is, push that to ensure fair representation across the entire country in both the House and especially the Senate. The Senate has to be reformed. You know what? I mean, we had a senator, Jacques Demers, former coach of the Montreal Canadiens. Well, what kind of a skill set did he bring to the Senate of Canada in terms of helping evolve the country? I mean, not an elected official. So, I agree with your suggestion about, Senate being elected as opposed to appointed. But it's going to take somebody who's going to have the mettle and the fortitude to look at, I have to make a decision that's best for Canada first, political party affiliation second. Until somebody does that, not much is going to change, Gary. And you know what? You and I, hopefully 5 years from now, are going to be having a show about, here's Canada and our 7 provinces and 3 territories and counting. We don't want to get to that. Somebody's got to do something, Gary. It's just not enough, too little, too late. But let's try to do something. I mean, that's what I would say to our elected officials.
We are in a new world order here in Canada. I just despise that terminology, but we are. And I really do think that, and actually Clark mentioned that their group grew out of the discontent over the pandemic and the public health limitations and everything. And I really do think that a lot of what's happening now between what came out of that and how people felt their rights were trampled upon in the name of public health, and a lot felt that there were other means and to an end as far as the governments were concerned in pushing this forward and using public health as the smokescreen. So I think that this has really started to take hold. And then you had the millennials and now Gen Zers who are coming through, and it's the younger demo in particular where this whole idea of separation is a solid option as far as they're concerned, and for a number of reasons that differ to a degree from the older demographics that have been around and gone through a couple of a referendum or two here in Quebec, and in the whole country, and based on, you know, so I think there's that part of it, and yes, there's you know, Clark mentioned kind of a cultural thing. There is somewhat of a different mindset in a lot of ways to a lot of different things in the West compared to in the East. That's only bound to happen. There's, you know, a different mindset in the Atlantic Canada in a lot of ways compared to what's in central Canada and out west. So there's a lot of odds and ends there. So we do have a few more comments, and I think maybe we should get to the comments and then we'll wrap up. Deborah says, all of Canada made the mistake of putting all of her eggs in the U.S. basket. I'm curious as to how Alberta was making out with Trump before Carney's speech. Trump was a madman before and after. Okay. And then Greg. Okay. Greg comes in with, I love what you are saying about growing up, but good luck with that. What we need really is a mechanism for us to equal representation. When we have the balls to do that, plus the huge issue is to redefine the roles of provinces versus federal, so we know if we can, in fact, put forward a national program that is like mental health. Leaving this to the provinces leaves us with a patchwork of programs with no consistency across the country. What a great way to rethink this on Bell Let's Talk. Consistency. Mm-hmm. And Max Starr comes back with Keith Wilson, constitutional lawyer, on why we are leaving and becoming the Republic of Alberta. Okay. And Greg said, P.S. Eddie, please be careful when speaking about Jacques Demers, as he was coveted Habs coach. He was well schooled in New Brunswick with the NB Express.
Indeed.
I did not know that. Okay. So, you know, again, though, and Greg brought up a good point as far as the whole thing about provinces and feds. And I've been hammering away at this for a long time, and that is when you have programs like healthcare, and it's supposed to be universal, and yet there is no standard across the country, minimum standards for the level of healthcare provided wherever you go in this country. None, zero, zilch. And yet the provinces still whine and cry for more money. And all I see more than anything else is the bureaucracy building up. You have more authorities and whatever agencies they want to call them springing up to run a cluster of hospitals. What do you have a health department for? Why isn't the health department running the healthcare system? Number one. And number two, why isn't Ottawa making the provinces accountable with key performance indicators set out for the money that Ottawa is sending to them for healthcare? And that goes for a few other programs, and mental health should be included in with healthcare. Anyway, I'm really getting off it now. One more here just came in. So, Henry G2V10, Alberta has been treated like a prostitute by the federal den of thieves in Ottawa, stealing your family's future. Alberta wants freedom. GLY, okay. That is a very common theme coming from the Alberta folks for sure. And they are passionately. There is no negotiation here. It's like we get the right vote, the right numbers, it's over. Yeah. It's like leaving a bad marriage. And sometimes that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I think, Eddie, do you have any final comments before we...
No, I think we've said a lot in the last almost hour, Gary. So it's, it was really great getting all those comments. Hearing Clark speak was an eye-opener as well. Although I had an idea of what was going to be said, but he pretty much put it in very eloquent terms in terms of the general feeling of Saskatchewan, on top of the general feeling of Western Canada, and them feeling sort of abandoned by the East, and they're not wrong. That's the whole point of this.
Yep, and just a couple of items to wrap up here. Saskatchewan's autonomy push versus Quebec's sovereignty tradition, not the same kind of a movement, that's for sure. Economic grievance fuels Western frustration differently than cultural identity in Quebec, and that is where the divide sits for sure. You don't hear, and why would you, when you're getting the largest share of the equalization payments, you really don't hear anything about the funding side of things. And really, when you think about it, this real push with Alberta and how it's really come into its own and grown, especially in the last few months, it's lowered the barrier overall for the conversations to start popping up more and more elsewhere. So it's more than one unity challenge, that's for sure, as you said. We've got 3 provinces all coming at it from slightly different angles and very much ready to pull the plug.